Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to another episode of the podcast, episode number 27, and today we are going to be previewing pre-season testing which takes place in just 2 days time. Yes, the Formula 1 season is basically now underway, but it really gets underway in 2 days time. I cannot wait. We're going to be previewing that today, looking at all the teams and what they need to do, or what the most key area they need to work on during testing to have a successful 2019. Also, though, we are going to get into the news that Sebastian Vettel, according to Matteo Binotto, their new team principal, will have priority over Charles Leclerc in certain situations. We'll get onto that later. And as well, we will have some more tech analysis of the new Williams as they released some studio shots of the new Williams yesterday, and we're going to compare the Mercedes and Ferrari cars in terms of the aero and even probably the liveries as well. But of course, today I have my usual podcast guest, which is Niblo. And Nib, how are you doing, mate? And I'm sure you're looking forward to previewing pre-season testing now that it is basically here.
I sure am, and we're getting closer and closer day by day to the start of the season, and of course, the start of pre-season testing. So everything at the moment is, well, very exciting.
Yep, I am very, very excited for pre-season testing, and I can't wait to see what goes down, especially in the first test. So let's just start going through the teams and start at the top and go to Mercedes. Now, of course, after winning both the drivers and the constructors ever since 2014, you'd think for Mercedes, well, there's nothing really to work on, massively for the next season. But in 2018, this is my opinion. I think a lot of people have this opinion, but the Mercedes car in 2018 was not the fastest on the grid, and that was mainly down to not having the most powerful engine on the grid anymore. And that is the area I think they need to work on the most, because they cannot allow, after really dominating in terms of power in this sport since 2014, they have to get back on terms, if not go back ahead of Ferrari. And it seems as though they are going to, because they've come out and said that they have designed an all-new power unit for 2019. And that is a good sign for Mercedes, not a good one for Ferrari or Red Bull, Honda, Renault, all of those manufacturers and teams. Because if it does work, then they could really, really do well in 2019. We'll have to see if it does work, though, or not. But Nib, for testing, what do you think they need to work on? Again, they have been so successful since 2014, but their crown, you cannot doubt, in the last couple of years has been under serious threat from Ferrari.
Yeah, most certainly the last 2 years Ferrari have pushed them, not all the way, sadly, because of some, well, mainly Ferrari's wrongdoings. They definitely do need to improve one thing. I don't think this will happen in the first test, but they need to improve their pace on softer compound tyres. It seems as if Ferrari have had an advantage on softer tyres compared to Mercedes over the past couple of years now. So usually Mercedes in testing just run a lot of the soft and medium tyre. So it'll be interesting to see if they continue that. They probably will in the first test, but come the second test, they probably will start to run a lot more softer compound tires to try and gather as much data and try to activate that tire or get it in the right operating range, because that is something they really did struggle with last year up until probably halfway through the season. So that certainly is an area of the car that they need to work on. Oh, sorry, an area of their game they need to work on. It's not obviously the car. But of course, with the engine, they take huge pride in having in having the fastest engine for well, a good few years now. Up until last year, only well, they weren't really challenged up until last year when Ferrari then actually had a quicker engine than them. So it's certainly going to be an interesting area to see. The guys at Ferrari were very confident about maintaining the fastest engine for this season, but you know what Mercedes are like and how much resources they have to put into that engine development. So, and of course, with this brand new engine with a brand new material or whatever it was, which makes it lighter, it's going to be very interesting to see that part of the battle between Mercedes and Ferrari.
Yeah, you mentioned the softer tyre issue. Mercedes, I've noticed this. They've had this issue since 2016, if not 2015. It's just their car gets more out of the harder compounds. And the reason I think that is, or was, is because their car tends to work the tyres harder in terms of just tyre wear during a race. And of course, if you're struggling with tyre wear, you're going to go for the harder compound of tyres. And I think their car is more geared towards that. So they do need to improve that. But to be honest, I don't think they really maybe even want to for 2019. And of course, the tyres for 2019 are, I think, are harder than last year's tyres. So they'll be more durable. That will help Mercedes in 2019. But yeah, that is an area that does require work, but to be honest, I don't think they're actually going to work on that area because it doesn't seem as though it's got any better since, again, 2016 or even 2015. But now we will go on to Ferrari, who revealed their new car, the SF90, yesterday. By the way, if you have not seen our reveal video / stream of the new Ferrari car featuring some analysis of it, go into the description and you will be able to click on a link there that takes you to that video from yesterday. So don't forget to watch that. Yeah, Ferrari, after last year, which was, you have to say it was a disappointment. Yes, they had the fastest car, and in the first half of the season were looking very good, but the way they just capitulated in the second half of the season, it was disappointing. And they do have a lot of areas they need to work on. Even though their car over the course of 2018 was a faster car, it wasn't easily faster than the Mercedes car. It was only just about, in my opinion, over 2018, the faster car. So hopefully Ferrari, when it comes to the pace of their car, they can improve upon that. And I think Bonotto said this yesterday, or someone who was at the launch said this yesterday, that this new Ferrari is kind of an evolution of last year's car, which of course was very, very fast. But for me, the one area they have to work on, that they have been failing in for at least 10 years, is development parts during the season and developing the car and improving the car as the season goes on. They have failed in this area so many times in the last 10 years. They have to actually start improving when it comes to this, because you'll notice in 2018 and 2017, what happens is, in the first 4 or 5 races, Ferrari have a quick car, but it hasn't reached its absolute maximum in terms of the raw pace they can get out of the car. Then during the summer, Ferrari will be at their strongest. That's from May until the Italian Grand Prix. But then for the rest of the season, from Singapore to Abu Dhabi, they drop off because they don't get the development right on the car after Singapore. And that's what they did, of course, in 2018 and 2017 also. The car got worse from about the Belgian or Italian Grand Prix, so basically September on. They have to improve this area. They do have to improve this area. And if they don't, Nib, then even if they do have a very fast car, and yes, they do have 2 very good drivers, but even if again they have a very fast car, if this new Ferrari doesn't develop well enough over 2019, then they're not giving themselves a good enough chance, in my opinion, to actually be successful.
Well, yes, I do want to defend them slightly here. I thought their development was really, really good in 2018. That's why they were faster than Mercedes for the majority of the season. Of course, they brought some rear wing changes in Singapore and a couple of other changes, which on their numbers worked, but on actual track was not working as they intended. Of course, that was a costly error, which they didn't even realize was happening, which was down to operational failures. And I think with Matteo Binotto, the man we can see on the middle of our picture there, I think he is the man who's going to turn Ferrari around. He just Sebastian Vettel has said it. There feels to be a different feel around the team. Um, I just believe that he will sort out their team operationally. He sorted out the technical side. He sorted out the engine side, and I just really do believe in Matteo Binotto. He he just what's the description I'm looking for here? He breathes confidence
Yeah.
into a team. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Um, I really do think that's where Ferrari need to improve. Well, I think we know that's where Ferrari need to improve. It's been their downfall for a couple of years now, and it wasn't really Arriva Bene's fault. But I think Binotto will be that man to actually take charge properly of the team. That's not really what Arriva Bene was there for. So having a bit more of a leader there, I think that will definitely help Ferrari in 2019. But in terms of the car, of course, they just need to get as many laps on the board as possible. Um, but certainly as much data as possible, because yesterday the car did look a little bit bare, but it's only the first spec of the car, so I'm sure we'll see a few more parts come Melbourne.
Yeah, I guess my point is with the whole development thing is because I didn't really mention about pre-season, but I guess what I'm saying is during testing, when you bring new parts to the car, and they will bring plenty, make sure that you learn them, understand them, how they work quickly enough. So if they don't work, you take them off the car because you'll remember Nib. Yeah, at Singapore they brought new upgrades, didn't work at Singapore, and then they used them for Russia and Suzuka, and they still didn't work but they didn't react quick enough. And I hope you're right that Binotto being the new team principal will actually help that or prevent that from happening. But I'm not 100% sure. He is a very good technical guy, but I think when it comes to more the political side of Formula One or the driver management side, he is yet to be proven massively in that area. And I'm very interested to see actually how he does managing Vettel and Leclerc. But yeah, hopefully Ferrari, again, learn their new developments coming to the car. And if they don't work, hopefully they've learned quick enough that they don't work so they can take them off and try something different once testing comes to a close and they go to the Australian Grand Prix. But now we'll move on to Red Bull, and well, it's pretty simple what they have to work on for testing. They need reliability, and if they can find it, if they can get enough reliable running going with the new Honda power unit, then eventually, I don't know, during the last couple of days of testing, try and see how quick the new Red Bull car is with the Honda power unit. But most importantly, it is about reliability, because if they're not reliable, it doesn't matter if they're quick, because even if they're quick, they ain't going to last very long in the first few races, especially, at tracks like, well, Australia. We've seen races in Australia where only 7 or 8 cars finish. Bahrain is quite hot, even though Honda did perform well there last year. Last year in preseason testing, Honda had quite a reliable testing program. If that doesn't happen this time, they might struggle. You don't know. So they need to make sure they find reliability. And I said this in my preseason preview for the top 3 teams, I think about a week ago. they need to find reliability, but they need to find it in a realistic time frame. Don't expect, the Honda power unit to be reliable, fully reliable after 2 days. It is going to take the whole of the first test to really see how reliable it is. And they need to be patient with Honda and really the car itself. But Nib, do you agree with that? And also, is there anything else that you think Red Bull and Honda have to work on during testing?
Well, for Red Bull, I think that their car last year was that good that there really isn't too much in terms of the chassis and the aero unless something goes dramatically wrong, say, sort of like 2017, where they had some major correlation issues with the car, which pushed them back towards formerly Force India. It's mainly down to Honda. For Red Bull this season, their reliability has to be up to it, has to be up to the standard that Red Bull expect, and Red Bull have high expectations, as we've seen from their partnership with Renault, and it's going to be difficult for Honda to meet that. It's quite clear. We'll get onto a certain picture later, but they have certainly given Red Bull all of the clearance to tightly package the rear of the car. They've certainly given them no leeway in that situation, and we've seen McLaren do that in 2015, and that backfired massively on them. So it certainly will be interesting, and absolutely the reliability of the engine is going to be massive. There's going to be a few teething problems. It's the first time running this engine, so the first couple of days might be a tad bit difficult, but by say the last 2 days of the first test, if they're not getting over 100 laps or close to 100 laps, and that is certainly a bit of cause for concern. Of course, you still have the second test left to smooth over any issues, but they will really want to start get off to a good head start, because if you don't run the car enough in preseason testing, it does affect you a lot. We've seen this with Red Bull in the past. We've seen it with McLaren. So it really is going to be important that they get off to a good start in preseason testing.
Yeah, they need to. And as you said there, you have to have a reliable preseason, because if you don't, you're then on the back foot compared to the reliable teams, because they're able to find the limit of their car quicker than you, because you're focusing on, reliability more than the actual pace of the car. And that's why McLaren in 2015 and 2017, and even 2018, to be honest, because of their reliability issues in preseason testing, they were behind other teams because they were still trying to find first off reliability before they actually tried to find speed. But before, guys, we go into the midfield and preview what they need to do during testing, right now in the chat, let me know what you think these top 3 teams need to do during preseason testing, and what is the most important thing they have to work on during the 8 days of testing. Let me know right now in the chat and the comment section down below. But before I read out the chat, I just need to let you guys know that for the 4 first days of testing, which is from Monday till Thursday, don't forget, I will be covering it live as soon as each day of testing finishes. So don't forget to subscribe for content like that. You can either do it on the bottom right of the screen or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe to the channel. But right, I will get reading some comments when it comes to these teams. Halam899 asks, do you think Honda will get their first win in F1 since coming back this season? Yes, I think they will. But when they get the opportunity, like a Monaco or a Mexico, they really have to take it, because this year for Red Bull and Honda is a year of development, really. They are going to have very few chances compared to 2018 to actually, get a race win. So I think they will, but they won't get many chances. So hopefully when they do get the chance, they take it, because I think this season is going to be very Ferrari versus Mercedes, and then Red Bull will have podiums, they'll have a race win, maybe 2 race wins, but consistently they are going to be kind of like 2017, third fastest. Simon Cragland says Red Bull will finish in P3. Astro Stevo says doubt Red Bull will be reliable in 2019. Their reliability sucked last year when they had the Renault engines. This year they have Honda, so yeah, nah. That's another thing when it comes to their reliability, is that the clutch on the Red Bull failed quite a few times last year, so they do need to work on that. Thing with Red Bull is you can't expect them, and this really goes for Adrian Newey cars. Adrian Newey cars are not reliable. Just look at his McLaren days. There'd be plenty of times when McLaren had a pole position or a front row lockout and both cars ended up not finishing and retiring in the first 30 laps because he pushes so hard on cooling and stuff like that that his cars don't last very long, but when they do last, they are immensely quick. So don't expect Red Bull to be reliable really at all with Honda. I don't expect them to be reliable because, again, Adrian Newey cars are not really reliable.
Just before we move on, Astro Stevo, I know, is Australian, and he said at the end there, this year they have Honda, so yeah, and then you were like, nah, it's like, yeah, nah, it's not going to happen. You know, that's a real Australian thing. So
okay, I should have let you read it out.
You just gotta learn the yeah, nah, not just the yeah, nah. It's yeah, nah.
Okay, I'll let you read out his next comment next time. Halam899, Red Bull win in Monaco, probably. Yeah, that's quite likely. Bastian, are you doing a watch along for testing? The reason I'm not doing a watch along is because I'm planning on going to the second test, you know, actually going to the track. So there'd be no point me doing a watch along if I'm not going to do it for the second test. So I might as well keep it more consistent in doing a end of day review or something like that. So that's why I'm not doing that. Mishari, sorry if I can speak. If I mispronounced your first name. Can't wait for Monday testing in Barcelona. Going to be so interesting this season. This is going to be interesting because we do have a couple dark horses that we'll get onto later on. Right, let me find a few more comments, then we'll move on to the midfield. Mario Master, I predict Red Bull to still finish way ahead of Renault and Toro Rosso to finish ahead of McLaren. I think Red Bull will comfortably beat Renault. Not sure about Toro Rosso and McLaren, but we'll see in testing. Pedro Goldfinger says, Red Bull are smart enough to know what they are doing. We can't comment too much on that. That's one thing I do have hope for, is that Red Bull's track record in the last 10 years, let's be honest, compared to McLaren and making the right decisions, is a lot better than McLaren. So I do have more faith in Red Bull Honda than I did McLaren Honda. The only reason when McLaren and Honda announced they were going to be partners again, the only reason back then that I was excited was because it was the return of McLaren Honda. There was no real reason for them to be successful, and they were never really going to be because Honda came into the V6 hybrid era too late. They should have came in 2014 and they would have been a year ahead in terms of development and speed, but that is their decision. Right. Halam899 says McLaren will be between 5th and 8th in the championship, in my opinion. In the early predictions we did, I think I went for 8th or 9th with McLaren. I can't remember exactly. Nature Suman says, I think Red Bull and Alfa Romeo will show their final livery for the season in the first day of testing because Red Bull livery was one off. and Alfa Romeo did their special Valentine's Day livery. Yep, absolutely. On the first day of testing, you will see the Red Bull official livery and the Alfa Romeo official livery, and we will cover that and take a look at it and what it looks like and compare it to the others on the grid. And also, if you didn't know, during testing or at the end of the first test, I will run a poll and I'll reveal the results probably during a stream as to who you guys think has the best livery. But we do have to wait until Red Bull and Alfa Romeo revealed their official livery. So we're going to wait until then. And the final comment or question before we go on to the midfield is from Simon Cragland. Do you think Honda will build a better engine than Renault? I'm going to go with Renault because they're more of a known quantity and also they are a works team. With Red Bull and Honda, we don't know how it is going to work out. It could go massively wrong or it could be amazing. We don't know. With Renault, we kind of know that we're going to get a kind of half and half when it comes to reliability and speed. It's kind of there, but it's kind of not. Stuff like that. But yeah, I'd have to go for Renault because, again, they're more of a known quantity. With Red Bull and Honda, we don't know. It might be a disaster. Hopefully it's not, though. But talking of Renault, let's now go into the midfield. And with Renault, this is, in my opinion, a big season when it comes to their development going forward if they do want to eventually start winning races or even world titles. This season, they have to pull away quite a lot from the midfield and they have to start pushing towards Red Bull Honda during 2019 or by the end of 2019. They have to start doing that because if they don't this year, then realistically, are they ever, going to win races on a, say, consistent basis or anything like that? Maybe not. So this year is very important. And I feel as though is that if they don't get the car right this year, and I hope they do, because I want to see Renault go up there with Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull and compete for race wins. If they don't get it right this year, I kind of feel as though that this goal to be winning races and a world title maybe by 2022, I think it is. I kind of feel as though that goal would be completely destroyed if they don't get 2019 right, and they absolutely have to. But the one thing they need to work on really is an overall car improvement, and that is, of course, the power unit. It has to start improving now. It's been 5 years. Come on, Renault, you've got to start improving. You're a manufacturer. Surely it isn't too hard for you to actually start improving when it comes to this area. But if they want to close the gap to Red Bull, then it has to come mostly... Sorry about my throat there. It has to come mostly from the aerodynamic and chassis side. Because last year, Renault and Red Bull had the same power unit. And Red Bull were about a second and a half a lap faster. So there is a lot of work that needs to come from the aero and the chassis. And testing is... At the track where they're testing at, it's a very good place to test and to also test out how good the aero is on the car. And they need to make sure that they have confidence going with the car, especially aerodynamically, because if they don't, then they're probably going to be in the same position they were last year. 5th fastest, but probably gets 4th because they have more money than the rest of the midfield teams. But Nib, for testing, what do you think Renault need to work on? And also, how important for you is this season, really, in terms of their development for the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, it's certainly a very important season for Renault. If they go backwards at all in any way, shape, and in terms of pace compared to the top 3, it's going to be very difficult for them to ever really catch the top 3 then, in my opinion, that they'll just be that far behind. But in terms of the in terms of what Renault need to improve, the actual Renault Works team's reliability last year was usually pretty good. So they probably don't have to worry about the reliability as much. Of course, they need a reliable car, but I don't think it's as big as an issue, say compared to Red Bull might have. So I think they don't have to worry as much about the reliability this year, but they certainly need to improve that the power output. Hope they've said that the horsepower is increasing, that they have more horsepower for this engine, and we hope that is the case because we haven't really seen the improvement in the Renault engine now. Even when it was, say, the second quickest in 2014 and 2015, and then, well, not 2015, sorry. Well, then Ferrari kind of came out of nowhere, probably having one of the worst set engines, and then having the quickest engine last year. So it is possible. It is possible to leapfrog and catch up on Mercedes, but Renault just haven't quite been able to do it yet. But the main thing that they need to work on this year is the aero of their car. It was quite a complex car last year in terms of the front wing, but it just wasn't working quite like the Red Bull or the Ferrari or the Mercedes. So that is certainly where they're going to need to improve. Just getting as many parts and ideas on the car as possible to try and test them out, get as much data on them, um, so that they can see what works best and try and come up with the best solutions, whilst everyone else is also trying to find the best solutions. It's going to be very important, especially with these new regulations, that everyone gets as much running done as possible, because you want as much data to then build on for the rest of the season.
Um, you made the point there, I think, with Ferrari improving after 2014, and that's really proof that you can, under these V6 hybrid rules, you can improve massively. You can do it. But Renault just don't seem to have really got a grip of these power units, and they really need to now because, again, as I said earlier, it's been 5 years. You would expect Renault, who have been so successful in F1 with their engines, you would expect them to finally get it right. And if you told me in 2014 that in 2019 Renault would still be struggling, I wouldn't have believed you, because I would have thought by 2019 they would have finally got it right, but they haven't. And they need to. They absolutely have to. And I'll also make this point as well. They don't have to have, a better power unit than Mercedes or Ferrari. That's very unrealistic. But actually show real progress, that you are really making gains in that area, instead of, we gained about a tenth. That's not going to cut it. A tenth is not going to cut it. It needs to start being 3 or 4 tenths. Something like that. Not 1/10 of a second. You need to really start hammering down the door of Mercedes and Ferrari very soon. And if they don't do that, and they don't get these power units right in terms of outright power, I don't see how Renault can really ever be successful, unless we go back to a time that we had between 2009 and 2013, where the engine power didn't matter really at all. So, yeah, they need to get it right, and hopefully they do. But now we go on to McLaren, who, of course, every preseason testing, they come out and say how great they're going to be and how they're going to win races and all that stuff. But, interestingly, compared to their usual preseason hype, they have been a bit quieter during the first couple months of 2019, and that is good to see. And I'll get into that in a moment. But the one thing they really need to show during testing is real progress. Show us that you are really, as a team and with the car, making progress, getting better, because in 2017 and 2018 they were only getting worse, and in 2016, yes, they improved compared to 2015, but I mean, I'd hope that any Formula 1 team could improve on the type of 2015 McLaren had. they really need to start, kind of like Renault, but only with Renault it's on the power unit side. McLaren have to really start making serious progress, serious gains compared to the top. They have to. They are McLaren. There is no excuses. They are one of the biggest teams in Formula One history and in Formula One right now. They have to make progress. But the one thing that I'm looking for them to not do during testing is deliberately go out there and do a headline lap time to build the hype. I'm hoping they go about it in a low-key kind of way. Just don't go out there trying to set amazing lap times on the softest possible tyres. Do what Mercedes do. Go on the harder compounds. Keep your cards close to your chest. Don't show everything you have. Because if you do that, you're then going to get F1 hyped up, and then we're all going to be disappointed once we get to Melbourne. So please, McLaren, do not build hype by doing something like that, because it's not going to help the morale of the team or the fan base or anything like that. But Nib, for testing, is there anything else that you think McLaren really need to work on?
No, I think the reliability issues that we did see at the start of preseason testing last year really won't happen this year, as now they've had a full year with Renault and they actually know how to package the engine properly, because everything was quite rushed after they split from Honda at Singapore, was it? Yes, at Singapore.
Yes.
So um, they know how to package the Renault engine now. They know how much, you know, sorry, I just seen a comment that made me laugh there. They know how much cooling the engine needs. So I don't think they're going to be setting the car on fire from how hot the engine is or how hot the car is like last year. But yeah, just the constant improvement in their aero side mainly, I believe. You know, obviously we talked about Renault's engine just before, but it's really down to the aero of the car. You know, they have the same. Had the same. Geez, what am I saying? They had the same engine as Renault, and you've seen how far behind they were. And you know, best chassis on the grid, as the comment just made me laugh there. You know, it showed they really didn't have the best chassis on the grid. You know, their chassis was very good when it come to 2017, but you know, it was certainly a big disappointment. So yeah, and I agree with you. They've taken a little bit more of a Ferrari approach, which I had suggested that they should take previously. So hopefully they continue to stick to that. Don't do too much media, you know, hyping themselves up or anything. Just stick to the message and not some boring catchphrase like, you know, believe in McLaren Honda or this or that sort of rubbish. You know, just talk normal. You know, don't talk in platitudes and all that rubbish. It's a joke when people do that. So I just hope that McLaren do keep their head and don't get too ahead of themselves, especially for the first test.
Yeah, as I said a minute ago, again, don't go doing a headline lap time, because if they do that during the first test, you know exactly what Zach Brown is going to do. He's going to start talking about how great the car is and how they're going to be winning, 21 races this season. So, yeah, just calm down, McLaren. Don't get too hyped. Just take pre-season as it comes, and then review things after testing, and then look at what you have pace-wise, and then go from there. Just take it one step at a time. Don't rush things. And hopefully they actually do make some progress, because if they go even further backwards, if you thought I was taking the piss out of McLaren last season, you haven't seen anything yet if they go even further backwards. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they do improve. But now let's go on to formerly Force India, now Racing Point, who are now starting a new era under the Lawrence Stroll ownership. Of course, now they have Lance Stroll replacing Esteban Ocon at that team, alongside Sergio Perez. But what they really need to say, compared to last year, what they need to I'm not sure you can quite say work on, but they need to have basically a normal pre-season, because if you look at last year's testing, they turned up with a 2017 car with a few 2018 parts, and then they didn't actually have a full 2018 car until they went to the first race. They need to make sure, development-wise, that they are, sticking to their targets. They're not behind where they want to be with developments on the car, and they need to make sure they have a consistent and good enough pre-season, which is not what they had last season, because they didn't really have a modern car at that point. It was more of a half this year, half last year's car. They cannot have that for testing this year, because if they do, then they're not going to have a good enough 2019 compared to, say, 2017 or 2016, where this team, when they were Force India, finished in P4 in the Constructors. But Nib, for Racing Point, is there anything else other than that you can think of?
Well, of course, for Sports Pesa Racing Point, Formula One team, I love saying that. Yeah, they were really hampered last year by the lack of money, especially, well, they didn't have their proper 2019 car, really until China. That's when they had that's when they had their full car. So they did, it was expected for them to struggle at the start of the season. And they did, especially in Melbourne. They weren't very good in Melbourne, but as you've seen, second half of the season, they were one of the better teams in the midfield, up there with Alfa, and with Renault, of course. So I do think that this year will be a lot better year for I nearly said Force India, for Racing Point. Um, in pre-season, they just need to get much as much data, as I've been saying, as much running as possible, and they have a great engine. We know that Mercedes is always going to be good in the back of the car, so it's really down to them improving the aero to try and bridge a gap or anything. They have been really confident um, in getting fourth this year, and potentially closing up on the top three. So with the backing that the Stroll family has now put into the team, they now have a platform to go and do that. So I wouldn't be awfully surprised if they are quicker than last year and just really better. So I do think that the Racing Point team will definitely improve compared to last year, because, well, they have money, so they have more money than they did last year. So I do think that there will be a positive first test for Racing Point.
Yeah, I'm also with the names. I do the same with now Alfa Romeo, but it is a bit hard to get used to, especially because Force India have been such an important part of the sport in the last 10 years. And I'm hoping with the extra cash they now have that they can really take the fight to fourth or even fifth in the constructors, because this team with not that much money in 2016 and 2017 was so good. They are one of the best performing teams on the grid, in my opinion, considering the amount of cash that they did or didn't have. So with this injection of new cash, hopefully they can really utilize it and use it in a positive way, and they need to if they are going to climb back up the constructors in 2019. But now we'll go on to the Haas, the new Rich Energy Haas. Now, 2018 was by far for them, since they've come into the sport in 2016, it was their best season to date. They did have a bit of a disappointing end to the season because they were hoping so much to finish in P4, and they really should have, because they did have the faster car. But they still had a very good season, considering that they have been in the sport for 4 years now, or 3 years. It was a very good year, but can they continue that in 2019? I don't think they can continue that type of pace, but there is one thing they really do need to work on during testing, and the Circuit de Catalunya is a very good track for testing that out. They need to solve the issues of tyre wear or overheating the tyres, more importantly on the softer compounds. For example, the Hypersoft or Ultra Soft from last year, which this year is the, don't even know, the C5, something like that. I need to learn what the tyres are for this year because they are so confusing. They've made it even more confusing for this year, which is so annoying. But yeah, they need to really improve when it comes to their performance on the softer tyres, because whenever we went to a track with softer tyres, they dropped off in terms of pace. The harder the compounded tyre, the better they did. So they need to improve on that and have a positive enough pre-season test, especially in the first test. Nib, with Haas, can you really see them keeping up that stunning pace, especially in the first half of 2018? Do you think they can actually keep that up?
Quite simply, no. I do think they will drop back into the middle of the midfield. It will be an exceptional job if they do stay towards the top of the midfield, and kudos to them if they indeed do that. But most importantly, they fixed their brake issues last year. That was a major issue that especially Roman Grosjean had with the Haas ever since he joined the team.
Yeah.
I do think that was a very important thing to fix. Of course, now they have to fix their tire management issues. Of course, we've mainly seen that at Singapore, how they couldn't keep their soft tires, their softer compound tires alive, the ultra soft tire, or it might have even, I think, sorry, the hyper soft as well. They couldn't keep the tires alive. Obviously, the tire rim sort of Mercedes stuff will help that this season with managing to keep the rear tires cooler and in the operating window. So I do think that Haas should be able to fix their tire wear issues, but oh, here we go in the chat. But I do think the Haas, they're going to have a reliable engine unless Ferrari have an absolute shocker, which I don't really see them having. But in terms of the aero, the barge board area, it was a little bit simple last year, and I do believe it is a little bit better this season. Of course, we haven't seen the true cars and what they will truly look like yet. We will see that when it comes to Monday, but I think Haas, as I say, just need to do as many laps as they possibly can. There's a few areas, as I've just mentioned, which they need to improve on, and as you did mention as well, the Barcelona track is perfect to fix those issues. So certainly going to be an important test for Haas.
Yeah, it should be when it comes to those issues. But now we'll get into the final three teams, I believe. We'll go on to Alfa Romeo. That car, I could keep looking at that car for so long. It's such a beautiful car. That lost my train of thought now, looking at that car. Yeah, Alfa, now that they are Alfa Romeo and not Sauber, what they need to do, especially during preseason testing, and this will be a factor if you didn't think it would be, this will be a factor during testing because they now have extra cash and because they have some very good personnel at that team. Using that cash, extra cash, compared to teams like Williams and Racing Point maybe, and Haas, teams like that, it'll be very important to use that to their advantage in terms of developing the car, even during testing, never mind during the season. During testing, that will be very important because if these very crazy looking aerodynamics on the car don't work, they'll be able to produce something, produce an alternative very quickly because they do have a bit more money than they did last year. I think it's $30 million more I think I saw that they have now that they're Alfa Romeo. So that is going to be important. But mostly for testing, really, with the car they have shown and the aero pieces they have shown, they really do need to find out quickly if these crazy aerodynamics they have gone for are actually going to work. Because if they don't, then they need to, early on during testing, say, right, it doesn't work, let's now come up with a different concept. Because if they go the whole way through testing with, for example, that front wing and it doesn't work, then they're going to be a bit behind once we get to the first race, because they'll then need to produce a completely different front wing. But Nib, for testing, not only what do they need to work on, but how interested are you to see Alfa Romeo in testing, considering the radical concepts that they have gone for?
Well, this is definitely the team that I am most excited to see on track come preseason testing, because they have gone with such a radical and quite simply amazing car design. Their car has so many aero bits on it. The front wing's incredible. The barge boards are so complex and are so cluttered. I really am excited to see how Alfa Romeo do. You know, I do think they really can have a terrific 2019. Of course, they just need to get as many laps in and see if these actual um, pieces work like they do on the CFD, because obviously these parts wouldn't be on the car if they did not work well on the computer simulations. So if they have if their correlations are all in order, we could see an exceptionally fast Alfa Romeo in 2019. And I did see a little bit of comments saying, I just need to scroll up now. I am sorry. It was from Wakanda Forever. Complexity doesn't mean fast. Simplicity doesn't mean slow. I do agree with you on some occasions, but if you look at the barge board area, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull by far had the most complex barge board area of any team in 2018, and they were by far the quickest compared to the rest of the midfield, who weren't even close to them in terms of the barge board area. So I do agree with you on some occasions, but you really do need a lot of aero devices and aero pieces if you want to be fast. That's why I am slightly concerned about Ferrari, which I will go into later. But Alfa Romeo certainly aren't lacking any aero pieces on this car. That's for sure. They've got slots and cuts absolutely everywhere on this car, and as I've said, they just need to get as much running done as possible to make sure that these parts work. I'm sure we'll see a lot of Flovis paint on this car in the first couple of days. Over their livery, which of course won't be this livery, because this livery was just their Valentine's Day livery. So it's going to certainly be an important, very important test for Alfa Romeo. They need to get as much running down as possible, that is for sure.
Yeah, I really cannot wait to see Alpha, and I hope that these interesting radical concepts that they do work, because I would love to see a team that has gone for something completely different. I'd love for this concept to work, because it would show some innovation, and I'd love to see that. And also, regarding that comment in the chat, when it comes to the aerodynamics, if it works on the computer simulations, you have to stick it on the car and see if it works on track. But basically, especially when it comes to the barge board area, you just need to whack as much aero as you can on, because if you can increase the downforce and help the pace of the car, you've got to put it on the car. You cannot, second guess that. You've got to put it on the car. Yeah, hopefully this new radical concept does work for Alfa Romeo. Toro Rosso, I'll be honest with Toro Rosso, not only for testing, but for the real season, it doesn't really feel like they're going to be doing that much, or that they want to do that much for the season or even testing. The only thing I can really think of that they need to work on isn't really for them, it's for Honda. They need to just continue developing the Honda power unit, sorry, like they did last year. And that's it. Because Toro Rosso, that even though they have aims of finishing, P5 or P6 in the constructors, they don't really seem to be that bothered, even if they finished 8th or 9th. And to be honest, I mean, I don't know what you think, Nib, but it's going to be a very quiet, I think, pre-season testing, to be honest. Maybe the only way they're really going to be newsworthy is if Red Bull with Honda doesn't work in terms of reliability. At least Honda do have that second team to test out parts that they want to use on the Red Bull car. But really, for testing and the 2019 season, there's nothing really for them to achieve, is there?
Yeah, I do agree with you. Toro Rosso, they're just a bit directionless. Like, I don't mean that as in, they're being managed horribly. There's just like, it doesn't feel, they're just in a weird place in the sport at the moment. It doesn't feel like they're actually trying to achieve anything. It doesn't feel like they're trying to really be quick, that's for sure. But they certainly will be a big help to Honda if they do have any issues. And even if they don't have issues, they will still be a massive help because, of course, with now Honda will have double the data that they did from compared to last year and compared to any year that they have been in the sport. So having two teams with the same engine is definitely going to be something that is important. But yeah, Toro Rosso just meh,
Yeah.
After Verstappen and Sainz have left, I don't really have any feelings towards them. I'm not super excited about this lineup. Yes, both drivers should be on the grid. I agree with the decision, but it's just a bit boring with Toro Rosso, if I'm going to be honest. Hopefully they give me some excitement, but it's it's just a bit weird with Toro Rosso. In the past, they've obviously developed a lot of Red Bull drivers, but I don't think any of these two are ever going to drive for Red Bull. I don't, especially Daniel Kvyat. That's quite obvious, but it obviously you just need to get as many laps done as possible, and hopefully we see a little bit more complexity on this Toro Rosso. We already have done when it comes to when they did their shakedown at the Valencia MotoGP track. So hopefully there is a lot more bits to be added to this car because it looks very, very simple. Certainly at the moment.
Yeah, with Toro Rosso, when you think of 2019 and the talking points, Toro Rosso don't figure in any of them. Even Williams, even though they finished last season, we'll get onto them in a moment. At least with them, you're interested to see how they possibly improve and how the drivers do. With Toro Rosso, they're just there. They're not doing anything. They're just... It's like they're in a coma. They're just sat there motionless. They're not doing anything. I mean, of course, they'll have points finishes. They may finish in the top 5 if it's, rains enough or crazy enough race. But for 2019, again, with the drivers they have, those drivers, none of them are going to get into the Red Bull car. I don't see a driver, even Dan Ticktum, I don't see him getting into the Red Bull car ever. They just seem like a team that is really going nowhere. They seem like, or they kind of feel like to me, Sauber at the end of the 90s and the very start of the 2000s, say in 2000. Very similar type of feeling. They're not really going anywhere. There's nothing really going on at this team, and there's no real interest. Hopefully they can actually surprise us and be amazingly quick, but they won't. Because Toro Rosso do tend to disappoint every season because they come out saying... Well, not saying, but they come out kind of looking good and then they don't really show anything that special. But yeah, we'll move on to Williams, the final team in this pre-season testing preview. And for Williams, it's pretty simple. Just improve and get closer to the midfield. if they don't, if they're at the back again, pace-wise, and finish last in the constructors, which they most likely will, I don't see how this team can ever recover, because they've been going downhill ever since 2014 in terms of their constructors championship position and just results on track and the way the team is in terms of finances. They continue to go down and down and down, and if it doesn't improve this year, I don't see realistically how Williams don't go out of business. I'm going to be honest, I don't see how they survive if this season isn't an improvement. Even if they finish at the back in 2019, if they're a lot better, then maybe they do have hope going forward. But if it's the same year that they had in 2018 this year, then what's going to happen is they're basically going to become Jordan. They're going to go out of business in a couple of years and be irrelevant, really, in the conversation of Formula One. And they shouldn't be that way. They should be in the top 4 or 5 in the constructors every year, in my opinion. But they've really, in the last 20 years, just completely destroyed their reputation and the well-being of the team, in my opinion. But yeah, Nib, for testing, I think it's pretty obvious that they just need to improve and get closer to the midfield, because last season they were quite a bit off.
Yeah, they were absolutely miles off everyone, and that come down to Paddy Lowe, really. The new design where they tried to get more downforce didn't work. They ended up with less downforce, and because they had more drag on the car, they were slow in the straights, and they were slower than what they were in 2017 around most tracks. So they certainly need to improve a lot, do Williams. They need to have a lot more complexity um, in and around the barge board area, and as we'll get onto later, it doesn't look like they have done so. So it looks like Williams are just trying to build their way up um, with quite a simple car, and then try to bring as many upgrades as they possibly can. But that's the issue. They don't have a whole lot of money, so they actually can't upgrade the car that much. You know, this is an issue that not Toro Rosso, that Racing Point, Force India have had in the past. That they've had, they had quite a promising car, but just haven't been able to upgrade it whatsoever. So with Williams, they do absolutely need to make sure that everything correlates in terms of the data that they had with the CFD. Um, just make the car more complex and make sure that there actually is more downforce on the car. They try to change the philosophy of the car. That's where I'm getting at. They tried to change the complete philosophy of the car last year, and it didn't work. And hopefully, the second year into that change of philosophy in the car, with Paddy Lowe now the technical boss, of course, um, hopefully that will certainly go a little bit better than what it did last year, because they were really, really bad last year. Really, really bad.
Yeah, they've got to improve. And an interesting point you make about their development last year. I remember Silverstone, where they brought, I think, was it a new rear wing, and it basically made the car, I don't want to say this, but it almost made it a death trap with the amount of times they were spinning the car in the fast corners, and it was a very scary looking car to drive. So please,
Yeah.
Williams, just make it, a good car this year. Is there any other points you want to make?
Yeah, I was just about to say, every time they closed the rear wing, the air wasn't reattaching properly, and it just, well, made the car very dangerous. And any time they did close the DRS, the car became very unstable at the rear end, and that's why they spun so many times. So hopefully we don't see any repeats of that this season.
Yeah, hopefully we don't. Now, before I go on to the chat, I'm not going to leave this up for a few minutes because I don't think we want to look at the toothpaste Williams. So I'll go back to this. This is a lot better looking, the Toro Rosso. Let us know right now in the chat, guys. What do these midfield teams really need to work on? What is the most important thing these midfield teams need to work on during pre-season testing. What do you think about that? Let us know in the chat right now and in the comments section. Before I get onto the chat though, again, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, because we will be covering live the first pre-season test. Right as testing finishes each day, I will go live with a review of what happened. So don't forget to subscribe. Either bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe right there, or click my channel name, go to the channel page and subscribe. And also hit the notifications bell so you are notified as to when I upload and go live. But let me now take a look at some comments when it comes to these teams. Right, let me find some comments. Nicholas asks, "Hey Chaz, do you know at what times will the testing be every day?" UK time, it's normally 8 AM UK time until 5 PM UK time. So it's, how many hours is that? 9 hours? But there is an hour lunch break in between. So it's about 8 hours of testing each day. But I'll be live basically as soon as testing finishes on that day. So for example, on Monday, I will be live right on 5 PM UK time with a review of the first day of testing. And that's the same for the second day, third day, and the fourth day. So don't forget that when that comes around. Skyman says, "I only think Russell in 2021 and one more year for Bottas." That's in regards to the Mercedes seat. By the way, if you want more discussion on that, me and Nib did a podcast on that last week, and it is in the description down below, where we talked about what does Valtteri Bottas have to do to stay at Mercedes. So go and check that out in the description. Skyman says, "I think the midfield will be closer, tougher, but that gap to the top three is still there." Right, let me find some more. Chaz, "I think the McLaren, they need to fix their drag problems. Their car is too draggy." That's another thing about the McLaren, is they had a lot of drag on their car. They have to fix that, because I mean, if you have a Renault engine, you're not going to be quick in a straight line anyway. The last thing you need is to slow yourself down even more with your aerodynamics in a straight line. You've got to make sure that you are getting the best out of your car in that area if you are struggling in that area. Dan Bell says, "Bottas needs to show his worth and take it to Hamilton." Aerodeet says, "Racing Point are my dark horses for the constructors." I assume he means for fourth, not for first place. Tonka Toy Truck says, "Renault does not have a chance against Red Bull." Realistically, yeah. I think Renault will finish in fourth, but realistically, I don't think they do stand a chance against Red Bull. Red Bull should take it quite comfortably. Annette says, "They need to put in as many laps as they can. No playing around, no silly games. Just take full advantage of testing." Rivlerd, "Which livery is the best looking in 2019? I am going to do a poll on that at the end, probably, of the first test, which you guys can vote on. And I will reveal the results in probably my day 4 of the first test review. So yeah, don't forget to check that out to see what you guys what your results are for who has the best livery 1 through 10. Sauber, I mean Alfa Romeo, going to surprise us this year. Hopefully Alfa Romeo are good. I want to see Alfa Romeo have a competitive season, especially with Kimi Räikkönen in there. Chaz, do you believe Bottas' new beard will give him superpowers? I do like his new look. I think he looks a lot better with the beard. Maybe it will work. Maybe it will. I think I've noticed as well, Sebastian Vettel tends to be a bit better when he has a beard going. So, yeah. Right. Final comment I'll read out is from Skyman. As Red Bull starts at the back, yes, when they pass Renault to drive to the top. JB saying Bottas' new aerodynamic facial hair. Yep, hopefully that does work for him. But now we are going to go on from previewing the teams for pre-season and go on to a couple more bits of, well, not news, but, well, this next thing we go on to is news. Let me quickly go past the toothpaste Williams. And now we are going to go on to our next story, which is Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari. And Ferrari have come out and said that they are going to give Vettel priority over Charles Leclerc in certain situations. Now, this has been quite controversial from what I've seen on Twitter, and I think we do need to talk about it. We absolutely do. So let me now bring up the quote and read it. This is from Matteo Binotto. He says, I think it's normal, especially early in the season, that if there are particular situations, our priority will be Sebastian. He is the guide with which we aim for the championship, but there's no prejudice. The absolute priority is for Ferrari to win. By the way, the source for that article or that quote is from Autosport. Now, let's really analyze these comments and go bit by bit. So he says, I think it's normal, especially early in the season, to prioritize certain drivers. That's basically what he's saying. As you can see there, I think it's normal, especially early in the season, that if there are particular situations that they're going to prioritize Sebastian. I disagree with that, because early in the season, that is not normal. Normally, that is an end of season thing, where a pecking order for that season has been really determined in terms of who's on form and who isn't. That is then when you start prioritizing one driver over another. You don't do it at the start of the season. You don't do that, in my opinion. You know, if you're going to and you're fighting for the championship, then do it. Do it at the summer break or just after the summer break at the Italian Grand Prix or something like that. Don't do it going into the season in the early races. I don't think that is a good idea, and that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. If Ferrari, if Charles Leclerc is leading a race in one of the first 4 or 5 races, if Leclerc is leading and Vettel is right behind him and Ferrari tell Leclerc to let him through, that will not happen. There is no way Charles Leclerc is going to let Sebastian Vettel through. And that's why I disagree with what Binotto is saying there, and I don't think that is going to work. And then he also says that Vettel is the guide with which we aim for the championship. Well, in my opinion, Vettel has had 2 chances at winning the title, and he has blown it both times. Of course, Ferrari didn't help him, but he had enough of a car in both seasons to win the championship, and he did blow it. So I don't think necessarily he is the guide with which they should aim for the championship. I think he should be given this season again to try and win it, but if he again bottles it, I don't think they can realistically going forward continue with Sebastian Vettel at that team. But I will agree with what he says at the end there, that the priority for Ferrari, or the priority is for Ferrari to win no matter what. Now, again, as I said a minute ago, even in certain situations, like I mentioned, if Leclerc is leading and Vettel is second and they want Vettel to be let through if Vettel is slightly faster, that's not going to work. Leclerc is not going to obey that. And that's not because Leclerc doesn't want to obey orders from Ferrari, but that's because Leclerc is going to Ferrari to make it his team and to win the championship. He's not going there to be a number 2 to Sebastian Vettel. And that's why this prioritizing Vettel in certain situations like that ain't going to work. it ain't gonna work. But Nib, in your opinion, do you with that quote, do you agree with Bonotto?
Um, I don't agree, but it certainly is very understandable in why they have chosen to go down this path. There is one little line that you have left out, um, and that was obviously you've read out this part. Sebastian, this is from Matteo Bonotto, of course. Sebastian has little to prove, and he remains our guide. Charles still has to learn, as pointed out by himself, but we know how talented he is. And he is right. Leclerc is still in his second season in the sport. He has plenty of time in Ferrari to 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 improve and to get better. Vettel is more experienced, and I understand why at the early stage of the season, in those situations when Leclerc probably still isn't 100% settled in the team yet, in his new surroundings, um, that they would favour Vettel in certain situations. I think, well, they do. They do. Every team favours certain drivers in certain situations. It's very unclear what Bonotto has said here. If say if Vettel is in front of Leclerc before the first pit stop, it is going to be Vettel who gets first preference. That is favouring another driver before the other. But that is how it should work. So it's very unclear exactly what Bonotto is meaning in this. Um, so it'll be interesting if there are any situations where they are very close on track to see exactly how Ferrari deal with this. But I just hope they don't treat Leclerc like Kimi was for many years at Ferrari, especially when he was teammates with Vettel. Um, but we've seen how well it worked for Mercedes last year when they were decisive in saying Bottas get out the way of Hamilton, and Ferrari really actually didn't do that too much last year. At Monza, they let Kimi battle with Seb into turn one, which really they shouldn't have done. They should have let Vettel get ahead. And then where else was it? Yes, at Germany when um, Seb was meaninglessly just sitting behind Raikkonen, burning up his tires, and then they were just very vague to Kimmy, and he's like, and then he did say on the radio, "If you want me to move, just ask me to move," and then they did so. So I do think that with Bonotto, they will be a lot more certain in what they're saying, although what he has just said is very uncertain. But I think when it comes um, on track and in practice, Ferrari will be a lot more, what's the word, clear cut, and I do think that'll be a big benefit. But in Bonotto here, I do agree with what he's saying, especially with that line that Charles still has to learn. Sebastian has really nothing to. Well, Sebastian does have a lot to prove, that is for sure, but he doesn't have to prove, say, as much as Charles does. First year, um, it's Ferrari, so there's a lot of pressure on Leclerc. He does seem to be very good under pressure, but that remains to be seen how he handles it in a top team like Ferrari. But it's an interesting quote to come out and say at this time of the season. But I do understand absolutely why he's said it.
Um, I just want to pick up on something you said about if Vettel was leading ahead of Leclerc coming into the first pit stop. If Leclerc is leading just ahead of Vettel going into the first pit stop, who gets the first pit stop, do you think?
Well, I think they have to give it to Leclerc. They have to.
But if
Um,
but if Vettel's faster, say at that point of the race, do you think they would give it to Vettel if they believe he is the priority?
perhaps, definitely. They very well could. Obviously that remains to be seen, but they could. They could do that, yeah.
But
Especially if Vettel is quicker.
yeah, I when it comes to stuff like that, in terms of pit stop preference, I would always say the driver in front gets the call as to when he comes in. Doesn't have to always be first in, because sometimes if you stay out longer, you can actually gain time via an overcut. But yeah, if that happened, if Leclerc was leading ahead of Vettel and Vettel was slightly faster but not exactly all over the gearbox of Charles, and Vettel got the first pit stop and then undercut past him, I wouldn't agree with that, because at the end of the day, you really shouldn't be fighting within your own team. If you are competing against another team, if you're Mercedes in 2014, 15 and 16, then yeah, fight within your own team, because there's no one to fight with you over a season. But if you're fighting against Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, I don't think it is a smart idea to really be, pitting the driver behind before the driver in front, when really you should just go for the very simple driver in front pits first, and then driver behind pits the lap later, and then the driver who was in front has a slightly bigger lead than he did over the second driver. That's what it really should be, but we'll see once the racing gets underway. But guys, let me know right now in the chat and the comment section, if you're watching this after, what do you think about these comments, and do you agree with Mattia Binotto? Do you think that Vettel should get priority over Charles Leclerc in certain situations? And also, tell me what situations that you would prioritise Vettel over Leclerc, or even the other way round. Let me know in the chat and the comment section right now. And from the live chat, I'll try to read through as many as I can before we go on to some technical analysis of the Williams and also Mercedes and Ferrari. So let me read through the chat. Guyman, oh, he's talking about Red Bull there. Ronan Brady says, I reckon it's in Vettel's contract that he is number one. I think, yeah, probably, but with Leclerc out the team, there really shouldn't be that anymore. And I think Vettel surely realizes that he doesn't have a proper number one driver status anymore like he did with Kimi Räikkönen. Kimi was a compliant number two driver. Now, if they have employed Leclerc as a number two driver, he will not be compliant at all. He will not be compliant. So that shouldn't be happening. Vettel should not be the clear number one, in my opinion. He should have been and deserved to be against Kimi, because Vettel was a step above Kimi, in my opinion. But after what Vettel's done in the last couple of years, and after Leclerc's very impressive year with Sauber, I don't think Vettel really deserves the number one driver status right now. Ronan Brady says he agrees actually with this, as Vettel is the number one, could cause points. I think he's saying could cost points if there is no number one. True. But they did this Ferrari in 2007 and 2008, where they didn't have a clear number one until after the summer break, where they then decided out of Kimi Räikkönen and Felipe Massa, who was going to contend for the World Championship. And that's how Ferrari need to deal with Vettel and Leclerc. Let them race each other until, say, the Italian Grand Prix, and then whoever is more likely to win the title at the end of the Italian Grand Prix, then you say, right, we are now going to prefer him and support him over you, because in the first 3 quarters of the season, he has done a better job. That's just my opinion. Guyman says Vettel more experienced and is still faster. Leclerc is still at the start. I'm not sure if he's faster. We'll have to see. Aerody, what if they prioritise Vettel and Leclerc becomes quicker in the second half of the season and Hamilton splits the two of them? what happens to the points Leclerc would lose in the first half? That's another thing. If they prioritise Vettel in certain situations in the first half of the season, and then Leclerc goes on an absolute tear in the second half of the season and misses out by the points he lost through them preferring Vettel, then it's not going to work. So for me, I would leave it at a respectful, equal driver status between the two if I was the team principal. Not, clear number one drivers or anything like that. Just a respectful, equal driver status between the two. That's it. Kind of like Vettel and Ricciardo at Red Bull. Even though Ricciardo did beat Vettel quite comfortably, they were equal in terms of racing each other for position, and they were very respectful of each other. So, yeah, if it happens that way, that'd be a great way for it to happen. Right, I am gonna read out probably a couple more comments, and then we'll go on to the technical analysis. Crystal Racing says Vettel will still be the faster guy over the season, but I'm sure Ferrari could force Leclerc into a number 2 role in these circumstances. Again, though, and really it does depend on the circumstances. Maybe if Ferrari are leading 1 and 2 with Vettel leading, and say the teams behind are on faster tyres and are catching them very quickly, then yeah, they probably have to deploy Leclerc as a number 2 driver. But if it's the other way round, I think it'd be a bit wrong to let Vettel ahead when they need to really protect against the other teams. But we'll see. Chaz, I think that Leclerc has to learn from Seb and handle real pressure. Well, there's nothing to learn about handling pressure from Sebastian Vettel, as we've seen. On being in a top team, so giving Vettel some priority isn't that much of a big deal. It's Leclerc's first year at Ferrari. True, but if Leclerc is as good as we think he is, then why wait to give Leclerc, equal treatment compared to Vettel? And there's no evidence to suggest that Vettel is going to dominate Leclerc or Leclerc is going to dominate Vettel. So why not, in the first half of the season, just let them race and see who is better? That's normally how it works. But there you go. Right, I think we'll move on now. By the way, guys, just to let you know, by the time we come to the end of the podcast, I will open up for a Q&A, but it won't be very long because we have already gone an hour and a half. So if you do have any remaining questions, then save them for the end, and we'll try to read as many as we can. But again, we have gone for quite a long time. But now, let's get into some technical analysis, and I'm going to let Nib really take over and talk about these certain cars. Now, first off, Nib, it is the Williams, and I have the front shot. And also, Nib, as well, don't forget to tell me when to move to a different shot. But yeah, I'll let you talk about the Williams.
Yep, so as released about this time yesterday, I think we have our first studio shots, well, CGI photos, whatever you want to call them, of the 2019 Williams. And here it is on screen, and we'll get past the awful livery. Let's just not talk about it. The front wing, certainly not as complex as we have seen from other teams. I expect Williams to run a modified, a newer front wing when we get to Barcelona, because this is very, very simple compared to what we have seen with most of the other teams. Of course, most of the other teams have had the end of the front wing lowered down to try and create that outwash effect, but we haven't really seen it on the Williams because, well, I don't know why yet. Maybe they're just hiding what they're doing. Maybe they've got something radical to come up with, but they haven't had any track time yet, so haven't had to show anything off that is very radical. But as you can see as well, these photos that Williams didn't that released yesterday, they weren't the greatest quality, so we can't really see too much here. That is for sure. Um, but I want to compare really. Obviously, we don't have the McLaren picture and we don't really need it. But as you can see, the floor, the leading edge of the floor here, um, just past the suspension, we can't. There's not many slots and cuts in the floor and in that little area just before the barge board. So, and that's something that needs to be absolutely massive to condition the airflow just before it hits the barge board. So, if you compare that, especially to McLaren, who had lots and lots of cuts, um, there's absolutely really nothing here from the Williams. But um, it, I wouldn't be surprised if they're hiding stuff here in these images. Of course, they are computer generated images. Um, they are not actual real shots of the car. So hopefully there is a little bit more development in that area because, of course, Williams and McLaren were the slowest two cars at the end of last year. So if you're comparing them to where Williams were last year, they certainly need to improve on that. But let's just go to the side shot. Sorry, to that 45-degree shot for the moment, where I just want to talk about the little S,
Hold on.
the what's called the S duct little inlet on the front nose cone.
Let me get it a minute. But I've got the side on shot there, as you can see it
Okay.
at the moment.
Okay, well, I'll just talk about the barge boards for the time being. Yeah, with the barge boards there, as you can see, there's nothing really too complex about them. It does really look like they're hiding stuff, because there's absolutely nothing there. And Christ, I have to talk about the livery because it just is so bad. It really is so bad. Just looking at it, it really is awful. But we can't really see too much of the Williams yet. I think once we see it on track on Monday in Barcelona, there will be a lot more stuff to talk about with this car because, um, it isn't the real car yet. So there isn't really many things to talk about with the Williams, but just on the rear wing, there are some nice little cuts at the part where it just hangs over the rear tire. A very pretty conventional shark finish um, design there. Shark fin, not shark finish. Don't know what I said there. Shark fin design there. But everything just looks very conventional, looks very simple on this Williams car at the moment. And you would expect more parts to be bolted onto the car. Yes, thank you. That's the shot. More parts to be bolted onto the car come the first test. But yes, of course, you can just see there, right next to the just above the neutral zone, that little hole in the side of the front nose cone. That is, of course, for the S duct, which just gets the airflow out from underneath the car and up over the top of the car to try and just to keep as much air stuck to the car, which is, of course, what you want. But with the side pods, we can't really see too much because whatever that aero structure that they've got in front of it is kind of blocking, and we don't have a good closer shot of that. So we can't really tell too much what the side pods are looking like. They've gone for that. They do look small, but nothing ridiculous. But I think we will move on from Williams. And I can't exactly remember what we've moved on to. We're moving on to next.
It is. Hold on a minute. Um, Actually, hold on. Made a slight mistake here. Hold on.
Oh, good.
There you go. So we're now going to compare the Mercedes against the Ferrari. So I've got this not full front shot, but kind of front-ish shot of the Mercedes, and we'll compare this to the Ferrari in a moment. But yeah, compared to the Ferrari, what do you think?
Indeed. Well, compared to the Ferrari, the Mercedes has certainly got a lot more aerodynamic devices on the car. That is for sure. There is a lot more parts. It's a lot more clustered than the Ferrari. The Ferrari is certainly very simple looking, but we'll just go through the fundamentals here. The top suspension element is raised up, unlike Ferrari. This has been a Mercedes thing now for a few years, where they're just trying to get as much airflow in between both of the suspension rods, um, into the barge board areas and in and around the side pods area. So they just have that bigger opening to try and get as much air through as possible. Um, so it really it's a certainly very Mercedes thing to do, and we have seen McLaren copy them this time around. And of course, there is the Ferrari. That's not exactly the best shot of it in terms of seeing this suspension arms. If you can go to the front on shot of the Ferrari, that would be good, because they do have a very conventional um, design when it comes to the suspension rods. But you can just see there with the front wing, they are quite similar concepts. Ferrari and Mercedes have come up with quite similar concepts in terms of the front wing, in trying to recreate that outwash effect that they had with the Cascade elements last year. Of course, the Cascade elements have been banned for this season, so it is harder to produce that outwash effect, but um,
I'm
they're just trying
afraid.
to recreate that.
I was just going to say I can't unfortunately find the full front picture. But yeah, this is the only one I can really get of the front of the car. So sorry about that. But yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well, I can talk. I can talk a little bit about. You can see with where it says P0 on the Pirelli tire and where the suspension rod is mounted, the top one. The Mercedes has that a lot higher. They have a little part, a little piece of carbon fiber that protrudes out of the tire, and then the suspension arm is mounted higher. So hopefully you get what I mean by that. But as you can see, even from this shot, that the Mercedes and the Ferrari are pretty different when it comes to the barge board area. Mercedes certainly have a lot more aero pieces in this part of the car compared to the Ferrari. But I certainly do expect the Ferrari to be bolting on a lot more pieces, especially when we see the car when it's actually on the track. You know, we seen the car yesterday, but we didn't see what it's going to be like actually on the track. And there we go. It is very hard to see with the matte finish here. That is for sure. And it is very dark. And of course, these are the leaked pictures, I believe, and not the best ones. So yes, but with the rear end, of course, everyone has noticed how tightly the engine cover is fitted on the Ferrari. So that is certainly an aspect where Ferrari. That's probably where the Ferrari car has changed the most. It certainly is an evolution of the car. Um, com- well, that's where the car has changed the most. That's for sure. It's definitely an evolution of last year's car, and it very much is so for Mercedes. But with the side pods, of course, Ferrari running with the crash structures below, with the side pod up very high, and Mercedes, they have a very small side pod as well, but they run a more conventional side pod with the crash structures above the side pod. So people, I was having an argument with someone in the chat the other day saying that they were the same when they definitely are not. Mercedes are one of the only teams who have not copied Ferrari's design, and here we have a better shot of Mercedes barge board area. As you can see, there's a lot more cuts and slots and actual barge boards in that area to condition the airflow. Um, and that's it's Ferrari were very clustered in that area last year, but for whatever reason, they've gone with a very clean design so far. Of course, we still have time to see um, if they bring anything else in preseason testing. But just comparing the engine cover here, you certainly see how Ferrari, as where you got the 77 on Valtteri Bottas's car, the Ferrari is slimmed very low down, um, and very sucked in. The Mercedes is not sucked in certainly as much as the Ferrari is. Um, so that is an interesting area that Ferrari have looked to improve on, and probably certainly not really an expected area that with these new regulations, everyone expects the development to be at the front and mainly in the barge boards, but shrinking down the engine cover and the rear end of the car has certainly been a big focus quite clearly for Ferrari, and they have done a very good job of that. And with the rear wings, both are very complex in that scenario. Both are very very similar. Lots of slots and cuts in the front wing, and especially where the rear wing hovers over above the tire. But yes, that is comparing the Mercedes and the Ferrari. Technically, of course, they both run the S duct. Mercedes introduced that last year on their car, a little bit later than everyone else, but fair enough. But fundamentally, these cars are two very different cars. They might have similar concepts, but having the higher suspension rod mount, the different side pods, fundamentally, these cars are very different. Ferrari runs a shorter wheelbase, somewhere in between Red Bull and Mercedes. They run a higher rake than Mercedes, not quite as radical as Red Bull, and as we found out, I got a bit too ahead of myself. They are running the same rake as last year, Ferrari, so same rake as last year, in between Mercedes and Red Bull. There's certainly a bit of a tweener between the Red Bull um, and the Mercedes. They're not too extreme, they're just in the middle, and it seems to work for them well. They certainly don't need to be changing anything Ferrari, because they have challenged Mercedes for the past 2 years. So it's certainly very understandable why they haven't gone for anything radical. And who knows, with their close relationship with Alfa Romeo and their former technical director Simone Resta there, that can maybe just be their place to see where their radical parts are tested out. But that will be it for the comparison between Mercedes and Ferrari. But there is one more shot that I want to really talk about, and that is of the difference with the Red Bull side pods, and how and the incredible difference that there is between what they were like last year and what they are like on this year's car. So if you can get that image up on screen, that would be great, mate.
I'm currently trying to find it because I didn't have it prepared.
Just
Just
check the Twitter DMs, because that it's certainly in there.
yeah, I'm just right. I think this is the one you're talking about. Let me just get it up on the screen.
Yep, lovely jubbly.
Also, not dramatic thing to say really, but you would expect Mercedes and Ferrari to go for different concepts because they are competing so hard against each other, and they do tend to come at it from different ways. But right,
They do. They do
think
indeed.
if I just roll up slightly more like that,
Yes, that is the
you can
image.
kind of see both in
indeed.
there.
Yes. Yep. Okay. As you can see in this image, just because of the size, sadly, we can't really um see it really too well. But Red Bull have certainly sucked in the rear end of their car a hell of the lot on this year's car, and that's quite surprising. With the Honda engine, it's gonna there is always question marks about the reliability of the car, and to have the side pods and the rear end of the car so much more incredibly tucked in um, than last year's car with the Renault engine is quite remarkable. It certainly reminds me of the 2010, 2011, 2012 Red Bull side pods. It certainly reminds me of that, where the engines, of course, were a lot smaller, so that the teams were able to do that. And yes, some teams are, and some people in the comments are saying, "Damn, just how thick the the 2018 was indeed." Like, indeed, it was very wide and very unusual for Red Bull. Yes, it was sucked in a little bit more than other teams, but certainly the 2019 car has really no side pods. It's really incredible. So hopefully Red Bull have figured out their cooling, and they always do go quite aggressive on the cooling. So hopefully they have gotten everything right. But that is just the last little point that I wanted to point out. Um, Technically, that I have seen so far from the teams. When it comes to the launches, there will be a lot more to talk about after the first test in terms of aero pieces. But yes, that is it for the car reveals so far, and it really has been brilliant. And well, the technical side of the launches, that's for sure. Of course, the Alpha launched their proper car at 7:20 or whatever time it is UK time. I think it is UK time. On the first day of testing, but of course we have already seen that car, so it's gonna be an interesting first test, that is for sure. Most of the teams just will be hoping that they have no reliability issues. Of course, on the first day, some teams might encounter issues just because you know it's the first time running the car for quite a lot of the teams. But of course now, Toro Rosso, Haas, Renault, Alfa Romeo have all done their shakedowns. So there will be a few other teams that will just take day one very slowly, just to make sure everything is running smoothly. So I'm very, very excited about the first test that is upcoming, and to see any new aero parts that come to these cars.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, and I'm sure there is going to be plenty of development during testing. And on the podcast we do in between the two tests, I will do another technical part of the podcast where we will go through all of the new upgrades that are inevitably going to come onto these cars. So don't worry, we will do more of that during testing. You can see there the Mercedes again. But guys, in the next 10 minutes or so, make sure to put in any questions you have in the chat right now, and me and Nib will try to answer as many as we can in the next 10 minutes. Now, the reason we're not doing 15 or 20 minutes is because we've been live for almost 2 hours, and I'm pretty knackered, and I think Nib is too. So yeah, try to get your best ones in the chat. And also, if you're watching this after we have streamed, don't hesitate to put any questions in the chat, because I will most likely answer them, or in the comments section rather. I'm going to answer them most likely after the stream. So if you are watching after the stream, don't hesitate to put a comment down below. But right, I am going to try to find the best comments I can, and questions that I can. Let me try and find some good ones. NN asks, how close to Vettel will Leclerc be in qualifying? I think Vettel will be a better qualifier than Leclerc. I think Leclerc is a better racer than he is a qualifier. So once we get to into qualifying, I think Vettel will take it. But when we get to the races, I think Leclerc will come back at Sebastian, and that is where it will get very, very interesting. Mr. Random Guy, what do you think of the Alpha livery will be? It's probably going to be the same as last year, to be honest. Maybe they'll go slightly different on one of the colours, but most likely it's going to be the same as last year, and that's not an issue because last year's livery was so good. Simon Cragland, when do you think Max has to demand a title-winning car from Red Bull? 2020, in my opinion. If by 2020 or end of 2020 he hasn't had a title-contending car, then I think he has to start thinking about leaving, to be honest. Because if Red Bull Honda don't work, then Max has to go. Has to go somewhere else. But we'll see what happens with that. Right. Just trying to find some more comments. Guyman, not me. I think that they tested it with Honda. They couldn't do that with Renault. And McLaren gave Honda a space where Honda had to squeeze their motor in. Red Bull designed it around it. I am interested to see if this very tight, aggressive packaging affects Honda's cooling and reliability and stuff like that. And Nicholas just asking in the chat, what do you think about the Red Bull Honda packaging? Do you think it's something both Newey and Honda perfectly nailed? I hope it is. Do you think that they have something hidden that they've solved reliability? No, I don't think they've hid anything. I think basically they've tried to kind of come to a bit of a compromise. I think Red Bull have probably won in that because they want to have a very tight rear end of the car. Hopefully it works. I think that's really all I can say. Someone asking there, I think it was Halam in the chat. How good would Prime Kimi Räikkönen be right now? Prime Kimi Räikkönen would be the second best driver on the grid right now if he was in this current era. He would be better than Vettel, and I think would be better than Verstappen, but it would be very close. But yeah, I think he'd be the second best on the grid right now, but those Prime Kimi years didn't really last that long. They only lasted, 4 years? Sebastian, who will be fastest in testing? I'll be honest, I don't really know. But Nib, given what we've seen, of course we don't know anything, but who would be your best bet for, say, being fastest and also being a dark horse? I think you already kind of said a couple of days ago that you think Alfa Romeo, but when it comes to being fastest, who do you think will be the most noteworthy team when it comes to that, given what we've seen so far?
Well, in terms of who will be fastest in testing, I wouldn't be surprised if it would be Red Bull or Ferrari, because of course they do tend to run softer tyres than Mercedes. But in terms of who will actually be the fastest team on the same tyres, I do think it will be Mercedes. They just look really, really fast, and that it looks like they're going to absolutely bolt out of the blocks very early on this season.
Yeah, their car, the livery looks great, but their car, in terms of the aero they have on it, it does look very quick. And the way they kind of were during that shakedown at Silverstone, they seemed really upbeat and confident, like they have a really good car this year. And trust me, guys, with the drivers, they know when they have a good car this year, or any year. Because I believe Jenson Button said this, that he knew about 2 or 3 laps into driving the Brawn for the first time that it was a very good car. So Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas will know already whether this car is a very good one for the season. They won't know yet how good it could be, but they'll know if it is good or not based on last year and stuff like that. So the drivers will already know, and also Max Verstappen, when he did the shakedown at Silverstone with the Red Bull also, he will know how good aerodynamically things are so far. But he won't know, as I just said, really the limit of the car. Right, I'll read out one more question, and then I think we'll come to the end of the podcast. And it is from Mr. Random Guy, who asks, Would you rather have F1 races where you have to wake up early or ones where you have to stay up late? For me, because most of the races are at a good time, I would say stay up late ones are better. Because if you wake up really early in the morning and the race is boring, then it feels like a waste of time. At least when you stay up, if the race is boring, at least you can fall asleep very quickly after the race. But Nib, I know for you it's a lot harder for these races, and I think, isn't it the European races for you is basically at midnight, and then the Asian races is the afternoon, I believe.
Yeah, for the European races, they start at, I can't even remember because after they changed it last year, it's bucked me up completely. The races usually start at 10 p.m. here, so they finish at midnight, but that certainly changes nothing really. I'd much prefer everything to be late because I stay up late all the time. It's nearly 4 a.m. here at the moment, so staying up late is certainly not an issue for me. Whereas, say, a race at 7 a.m. in the morning, like Brazil or the US Grand Prix, that is certainly a lot harder to wake up for. So certainly later in the day, later in the night, early morning, that they're fine for me.
Yeah, for me, the early races are Australia, China, Japan. I think that's it. There used to be India and Korea that used to be early on as well. I do prefer the later on ones like Canada, Brazil, the US Grand Prix in terms of UK time and Mexico. But yeah, for you, I know it's a lot harder, and yeah, I think it is a bit better to stay up for a race than it is to wake up early for a Grand Prix. But Nib, thanks for coming along, mate. And that is, by the way, the end of the podcast. But yeah, thanks for coming along, mate. And testing 2 days away, and we can't wait, can we?
Yeah, we really can't. I don't. I think we've emphasized it more than enough that we are very excited for preseason testing. But once again, thank you for everyone in the chat for coming along. It was great to see a good attendance for the stream today. And of course, we had a great discussion as we usually do for just about 2 hours now. So thank you once again, and I hope everyone has a good day.
Yeah, we have been going for what feels like a long time, but it was a very good stream today. So yeah, thanks, mate, for coming along. But guys, that is the end of today's podcast. Now, I just need to let you guys know tomorrow I will be uploading a video, and it is a preseason preview of the midfield. Now, some of what I've said today is kind of repeated in that, but there are also some extra points laid on top in that preseason preview when it comes to what the teams need to do in testing to close a gap, either to the top of the midfield or to the top of Formula One. So that is coming out tomorrow, anytime between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. I don't know yet for sure, but I will post on Twitter and in the Discord server and on the community part of my channel. I will, in the community part of my channel, I will, what was I going to say? I will post an update as to when that video is coming out, but it will come out tomorrow. By the way, also, if you've heard a couple notification sounds, sorry about that. It's my computer. It has YouTube comment notifications on, so I'm currently getting some comments. So yeah, sorry if you're hearing that. But again, that's it for the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. We will be doing or we'll be covering rather, the first test at the start of next week. Right as testing finishes on each day, I will go live reviewing the day of testing and looking at what has happened. So for content like that, don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe, and hit the notifications bell for more content like that, and like this as well. And as well, like this video, comment down below what you thought of this video, and comment down below What do you think the teams need to do in preseason testing? Also comment down below, what do you think about Binotto's comments about Vettel getting priority over Charles Leclerc? And if you have anything else to comment about, then make sure to put it in the comments. Don't forget to join our Discord server. That's the best place for notifications for my videos. So don't forget to join that. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110. That is a very good place to keep up to date with me when I go live, when I upload videos and stuff like that. And also check out my website, ChazzaHDF1, for more content like this. But guys, until tomorrow, between 12 PM and 5 PM UK time with my pre-season preview of the midfield, and until the next stream, which is on Monday at 5 PM UK time, with a review of the first day of testing, it's been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.